Colleen Abel, thank you so much for joining me on Walking Inside Poems.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you and looking forward to talking about Thomas Lux and the poem you chose. Uh,
Yes.
Before we jump into that, if you will, for our viewers and listeners, can you give them just a quick summary, a little bio of who you are?
Yeah. So I am primarily a poet and creative nonfiction writer. I got my MFA from Warren Wilson, which is a place that Thomas Lux taught for a long time. And I also have a PhD in creative writing from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I've authored 3 collections of poetry. The full length is called Remake. It came out in 2017. And I am assistant professor of English at Eastern Illinois University. So I'm coming to you from sunny Champaign, Illinois.
Nice. Is it sunny? What's your
It
weather?
is. It's lovely today. It's really
Nice,
nice. Yeah.
nice. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town called Waukegan, which is the hometown of Ray Bradbury. So,
Nice.
AKA Greentown, Illinois.
Yeah.
So yeah, far, far north Chicago suburbs. Yep.
How old were you when you first allowed yourself to call yourself a poet?
Yo, that's a great question. I think that I was always really interested. My dad was an English major and he had all his books from college in our basement. He had them on shelves, but they were in the basement. And I would go down there and I would play school and I would open up like, the biggest books I can find, which were usually like, the complete poems of Emily Dickinson or whatever. And so I remember reading poetry when I was like, 8 or 9 as a sort of play. And I couldn't understand, especially like Dickinson or whatever. I just couldn't understand really anything. But, Dickinson's very like, there are those poems that are really sort of magical for children, like I'm Nobody,
Yes.
Who Are You?
Yes.
And so I was like, wait, this one I get, or this one is cool. And so I think I started writing poetry really young, but in a way that was sort of semi-serious when I was maybe 12. So I would say maybe 12. And then by the time I was like 13, I was like, I want to study this in school. And I never really changed from that moment. So that was always my trajectory. So yeah, maybe 12, I would
Okay.
say.
And other than Thomas Lux, who are some of the poets who you've written about and or have inspired you, who you like to read?
Yeah, yeah. Well, aside from Dickinson, my dad was a big fan of Audrey and Rich. So that was an early influence. I remember getting to high school at age 14, and in French class, you had to pick a French name, and I was like, I'll pick Audrey.
Nice. You had a cool dad, apparently.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And he was a librarian. So that certainly, helped the book flow in the house.
Yeah.
So Plath was a big person for me, and Sexton was a big person for me, like in high school and college. And then I studied with the poet Dan Tobin at Carthage College, which is where I did my undergrad. And he really sort of introduced me to contemporary poetry, people that were still alive and writing. And that was how I came to know about Thomas Lux. And that was, a lot of uh, contemporary people that I came to really, really, really love. Louise Glick. And Elizabeth Bishop, although she, of course, was gone by that time. But yeah, and then, of course,
Yes.
even younger poets that I got introduced to all throughout grad school. Douglas Kearney is a big favorite of mine, somebody that's writing right now. Um, yeah, so I would say, yeah, that sort of trajectory of, Dickinson, Plath, Rich, Sexton, Bishop, and then some newer generation, people mixed in there.
Something that I found, you get introduced to poetry in school and you get to know, not just the huge names, but you get to know quite a few poets who are anthologized. And then, as you said, you start looking at contemporary poets and you realize, oh my God, I could discover a new poet every day and not run out of days.
Yeah.
So many great poets writing today.
Yeah.
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 Well, as I think you know, I found you because of an essay you wrote on Thomas Lux that you published in Plowshares um, at Emerson, and I want to read just a tiny little section from that. I will put a link to this in the show notes so people can read the entire essay, but I just love this little section here. He was the first living poet you met, and you said he looked like a cross between a rock star and an engineer with his long blonde hair and professorial glasses. His voice could have carried across a football field. I asked him to sign a book shyly and slunk away. I had no idea then that I would eventually be accepted to an MFA program where Lux taught, and I would have the luck to hear him read many more times. When Lux died on February 5th at the age of 70, I thought a lot about what made his poems so resonant, what made them stick in the mind beyond just the personality delivering them so memorably. Although there are numerous craft elements I could point to, it seems to me that their central quality is so often a large-heartedness that is difficult to describe, but unmistakable to encounter. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's get into this poem. You chose, there's a lot of great Lux poems. You chose I Love You Sweatheart,
I did.
which
Yeah.
is just such a fun little poem. You know, he is a guy with kind of a wry sense of humor, isn't he?
Yes. Yes.
So I'll go ahead and read this, and then I'm going to ask you to read it to take us out here shortly. But again, it's I Love You Sweatheart. A man risked his life to write the words. A man hung upside down, an idiot friend holding his legs, with spray paint to write the words on a girder 50 feet above a highway. And his beloved, the next morning driving to work, his words are not meant to be so unique. Does she recognize his handwriting? Did he hint to her at her doorstep the night before of something special, darling, tomorrow? And did he call her at work, expecting her to faint with delight at his celebration of her, his passion, his risk? She will know I love her now. The world will know my love for her. A man risked his life to write the words. Love is like this at the bone, we hope. Love is like this, sweetheart, all sore and dumb and dangerous, ignited, blessed, always, regardless, no exceptions, always in blazing matters like these, blessed. So what drew you to this particular poem?
I think that there is a real tenderness toward this figure. I think that one of the first things that struck me about it was that, you know, you think it could be mockery at first. You think it
Yes.
could be something, you know, like what an idiot, you know, haha, this guy wrote, you know, misspelled this beautiful message that he was trying to write for his beloved. And it seems like it could be making fun of this guy for a good while, like maybe 3/4 of the way through the poem, you still think is he making fun or whatever. And then there's this shift, I think, about right where he says, she will know I love her now, where the poet speaks in the voice of the man. You know, there's no italics there. It's just as if he's stepped into this man's body or this man's psyche. And we know, I think in that moment, or we get the sense in that moment that he identifies with this man and that it's this sort of tender celebration of the way that love is, you know, stupid and risky and
Yeah.
lovely. So I think, and that maybe alludes to that excerpt from my essay that you read about sort of large-heartedness. I think that this poem and lots of Lux's poems are always sort of, well, first, I think humor is always a generous gesture toward the reader. But also I just think that this sense of being at one with people who are, you know, maybe, well, I guess an article I read called it underdogs. So maybe that's a good way of putting it. The people who are, not the elite
Yeah.
um, of society. So I think that initially is what it was. And then when I started looking at craft, I just got more and more impressed. But that initial sort of humanity and sort of love of humanity was what drew me in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I totally agree with you. And I think it kind of surprises me at the end. I too was reading, especially when he calls his friend an idiot. He says an idiot friend holding his
Yeah.
legs.
Yeah.
He risked his life to write these words and then he misspelled sweetheart. It's just sort of one of those kind of comical moments that could very easily descend into just mockery, as you
Yeah.
said. But there's, at the same time, he's sort of I don't know, honoring this guy in a way that he went to this trouble, and it's so. I think he's saying it's so typical of what love is at the
Yeah.
bone, as he says, all sore and dumb and dangerous, ignited. Do you read blessed or blessed when you read that?
Blessed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Always, regardless, no exception, always in blazing matters like these. How is this a blazing matter? What do you think about that word? That's an interesting word.
Yeah, yeah. And especially with Ignited coming a couple lines before. And Lux was a really great love poet, I think. Or maybe I should say, many of the poems that I think of when I think of him are love poems. There's this other one that I wrote about in that essay called Towards, that's sort of all of these different modes of transportation towards the lover, right?
Yeah,
Roller skates and, um, cars and all these things. And I think that, yeah, I think that that word sort of captures I mean, I guess it's skirting a cliche of like love as fire or flame or whatever, but Lux always skirts the cliche. He always goes to the side of it. And it's hard in a love poem to do to do that. Um,
it is. Yeah,
yeah. And I think too that line that you just said there, love is like this at the bone. Um, he doesn't say deep down or in the soul or it's the bone, which I also really love.
yeah, that is nice. It is hard to write about love without sounding cliche or silly.
Yeah.
I just remembered I hadn't thought about this in a while. I'm a singer-songwriter, and many years ago I tried to write a love song to my wife, and what it ended up being, the theme of the song was, I can't write a love song. So this is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You're going to get an attempt, my sort of narrative of my attempt to write. Should I say this? No, that doesn't work. Should I say this? No, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, okay. I mean, let's go back and maybe pick a few more of these lines to talk about, and it feels like we're breezing through it pretty quick. So maybe we might just look at another poem of his as well.
Sure.
Uh, okay, what else? Anything else you want to point out about the poem? What about these question marks? Um, I struggle reading it, especially when two of them he has. I think it's two of them. He has ellipses. Maybe it's just one.
Yeah.
He has these ellipses and then a question mark, and then I guess it's just one. There's three question marks, and his beloved. The next morning
Yeah.
driving to work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I kind of instinctively read it that way, but I don't know with those ellipses. And then of something special, darling, tomorrow. What do you think about these question marks? Any thoughts you have about them?
I I love that they sort of evoke um this imaginary conversation with this man in a way. I feel like he sees this in his car. Um, and I will say that Lux did a lot of driving. He commuted from New York to Massachusetts, I think, on a regular basis, and he would always talk about and he had a lot of poems about driving because he spent a lot of time in his car, and he would always talk about um, honking and waving to Wallace Stevens's town when he would go by on the
Uh,
highway or whatever.
yeah,
But I
I
just
read this.
picture, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, which is great. I love the idea of Lux and Stevens sort of communing across
Yes.
time or whatever with each other.
Yes.
Um, but I picture him in his car and seeing this and sort of beginning this sort of Q&A with this man who obviously can't answer back because he's a hypothetical, it's all this hypotheses, right?
Mhm.
Was an idiot friend holding your legs, guy? Was your beloved,
Yeah.
supposed to
Yeah.
see it driving? Did you hint something to her? Did you call her at work? And he's kind of answering himself a little bit in there. So he says, his beloved the next morning driving to work, and then he kind of answers, or not answers, but he makes a proclamation of his own, the poet, right? His words are not meant to be so unique.
Right.
So it's almost like he creates this hypothetical dialogue with this invisible person all the way through up until that moment that I talked about, where he kind of embodies the man's voice. She will know I love her now.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. All the question
so
marks come before that. And so
yeah,
yeah, it's almost like he's playing with, what the fact that he has a question mark the next morning driving to work says, I assume, I don't know,
yeah,
is he
yeah,
assuming? But then slowly but surely he starts taking on the persona of the guy himself.
yeah,
Uh, and you're right, that's that moment. She will know I love her now.
yeah,
No more question
yeah,
marks after that. Yeah.
yeah.
But then distancing himself again when he says, a man risked his life
Yes,
to write the words. But
yes,
yeah.
yeah. Kind of in and out of that reverie
Hmm.
in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Really cool little poem. So did you did you study with Lux? I know you saw him read more than that one time. Did you take any classes with him? What was your relationship with Lux like?
So, um, I went to Warren Wilson is a low residency MFA. So with the low residency MFA, you go, um, well, lots of programs are different, but at Warren Wilson, as in a lot of other places, we went twice a year to campus, and we would work one-on-one with a writer for the whole semester, and then twice a year you'd go, and there'd be readings and lectures and workshops and all of that kind of packed into a small space. So the interesting thing about Warren Wilson, even though I never worked one-on-one with Lux, and he was never my workshop leader, um, you still get to attend, the lectures that he gives and the readings that he gives and everybody, and there's a real, I felt like Lux was in some ways kind of a mascot of Warren Wilson. We would have a dance at every residency that was called the Sweatheart Ball. Um, and he was just
Nice.
a really beloved figure. And he was a very larger than life person. Like I said, he was very loud and striking looking and very tall. And so you felt like you knew him. And also, I think his readings, which he was pretty well known for his readings because he was a great deliverer of his own poetry. They made you feel like you knew him, which is of course a crafted thing, but it's also a generous crafted thing. It's a real thing of beauty, I think, to have a poet who can sort of make you feel like the kind of person that they are. And so, no, I didn't work with him directly. I just he was such a big part of most of the residencies that I attended, and I saw him one time at in New York. He was doing a reading, and he was with my teacher, Dan Tobin, who was also reading in New York. And it was a Warren Wilson reading specifically for sort of people in that area, in the New York area. And I was talking to Dan Tobin, and Thomas Lux came up, and he was like, "Oh, Dan, I haven't seen you since I came to read at that, shitty little college you taught at by the lake." And that was the college that I
Ouch.
went to.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
was very Lux as well, like the sort of steamroller humor and stuff. But that was also the first time that I saw Lux read that he was referring to, that time that he came to visit. And that was the last time that I saw him. So just like this big impression made from Warren Wilson that sort of stayed with me of this, giant personality.
Do you teach Lux? Do you introduce Lux to your students?
Um, I don't know if I have. And I think there was a time that I don't know. There was a time when I sort of gravitated a little bit away from sort of narrative-ish poetry. And I was like, I had a real hunger for people who were doing things that I felt like I couldn't do. Like I'm a very narrative poet. And so for a while, I immersed myself in poetry that was much more, either pure lyric or experimental in some way. Um, and so I sort of got away from Lux a little bit. And but recently I've gone hard back in the other direction. I think the older I get, or maybe it's the state of the world or something, I really am seeking out poems that are, I think, risk earnestness, that aren't afraid to be earnest, that aren't afraid to be heartfelt, that aren't afraid to tell a human story in a lucid way. And that seems to me to be what I value now. I feel like I don't know if I went through a dark night of the soul or
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
where I was like, oh,
Would that, for example, lead you to Mary Oliver?
well, and yeah, it's funny you say that because, I think there's a little bit of, yes, there's a little bit of snobbery out there around Mary Oliver, and also people like Sharon Olds, I would also put in that category a
Yep,
little bit.
yep.
And for a long time, it was kind of like, oh, well, that's for people who want accessible poetry. Like that was a bad thing. And I
Yes.
wouldn't say I fully got caught up in that, but um, I think I was, you know, I think I put it away as if it wasn't something that I needed. And now I think, like I said, maybe with the world being what it is, or maybe whatever, for whatever reason, it is very much what I need and want right now.
Good.
And so Lux has really come back in. And I've been teaching creative nonfiction for the past couple of years at my school. So I haven't, it's been a couple of years since I've done poetry, but I'm gonna put him back in, I think, because I think this is the kind of thing that students really respond really well to. And I also think I'm often looking for poets. Tony Hoagland, I would also put in this category as somebody who really interrogates sort of American masculinity in a way that I appreciate with humor. Matthew Olsman is another person that I would put in that category. That sort of yeah, looking at reminding people that gender performance extends to men as well. I think that's really important for young poets to see too. And so yeah, Lux ticks all those boxes for me. So I'm coming back.
I'm glad I had some small part in that. Now,
You did.
this
Thanks.
is this is a little off topic, but I'm very curious. So I want to ask you, you're teaching creative nonfiction. So what are some of the works that you're having your students read?
Well, this won't surprise you to hear that my jam is very much sort of lyric, creative nonfiction. I think a lot of poets who find their way toward creative nonfiction land there. And I absolutely love, creative nonfiction by poets. So I love, Maggie Nelson, I love Jane and the Red Parts. I'm going to be teaching that in the fall, teaching writing about crime in the fall. So we're going to look at that. I love Victoria Chang's Dear Memory. I love Natasha Trethewey's memoir. Uh, I love Carmen Maria Machado in The Dream House, I think is one of the best memoirs of the past 20 years. Oh gosh, there's so many I could name, but I definitely love the people with sort of one foot in poetry and one foot
Yeah,
in memoir.
poets poets are the best nonfiction writers that we have, I
We
think.
are, we are.
I think so.
It's just true.
Well, before I ask you to read this poem to take us out, we've got a little more time. Are there any other poems that you would, if someone bought this book on your recommendation and you recommended I Love You Sweatheart, is there anything else here that you kind of stands out that you would say, and it's okay, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if does anything come to mind when you say, oh, you should look at this poem too?
Well, I did mention towards
Oh,
a
that's
minute
right.
ago. We could look at that
Yeah,
one.
let's look at that for a minute.
Let me pull
So
that up here.
I've got it here. This might be awkward, but I'll read it.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
And it's for Rachel. Towards you, on wheels, car, bus, cycle, truck, scooter, roller, skates, trolley, tram, tumbril, towards you, like every river on the Andes eastern slopes, towards the Amazon, unceasing, around, or pooling for a while, then spilling downhill again, through, as in how a tunnel is drilled through a mountain, towards you by air, jet, turbo, prop, balsa biplane driven by a big rubber band, jumbo Airbus on Dumbo's neck, one-seater copter, homing you are home, pigeon's pouch, hyperbole perhaps, rhapsobabble, but true, in a car towards you, how many yards, therefore seconds lost changing lanes, two more red lights instead of green? Toward you, more oxygen, each breath. Towards you, each mile lifts lead X-ray vests from my chest. Each mile, greavy needles removed from my eyes. Towards you, I'll take a sled, chariot, swing low, rent a llama. I'll run 2 miles, walk one, run towards you, towards you. I am on a sure course, every inch of sail aloft, towards you, harbor, origin, art. Wow. You know,
I know.
it's almost hard to read. There's a staccato kind of thing there that I don't know if that's he has in mind that lurching towards or not, but I found myself really it there's an odd music to it. Let me just put it that
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that's a poem where I think for me, that poem taught me a lot about how to use sound as an engine to move through a poem. I mean, that there's so much joyful play in sound and language there.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really worth I don't think it's online anywhere. I think it's just in the book. So this is a good plug to tell listeners to buy the book. But there's so much there that to absorb. It's hard to like get it all in and just hearing it.
Yeah.
It's worth a read a few dozen times. But even like, um, by a big rubber band jumbo Airbus on Dumbo's neck, like the jumbo Dumbo sort of, rhyme there, and just lots of those little internal rhymes and lots of just, that stuff that poets love to nerd out about, that harbor, origin, heart, that,
Yeah.
the H sounds and the R sounds and the, yeah, there's just so much beautiful texture to that poem. And again, it's very simple conceptually. It's just kind of,
Another
I
love
love
poem.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to be where you are and I want to get there fast and whatever. But just
If
the
if this
sonic.
didn't work with Rachel, then nothing's gonna work. I
Yeah,
would
exactly.
I would take anything to get. I'll take a chariot, and then that little humor of swing low,
Low. Yeah.
and the Dumbo reference. He's a very funny guy, but he's very serious as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting. Well, folks, check out Thomas Lux if you have not before. He's such an interesting guy. And let's see, Colleen, would you read "I Love You, Sweatheart" to take us out here?
Yes, I will. I love you, sweatheart. A man risked his life to write the words. A man hung upside down, an idiot friend holding his legs with spray paint to write the words on a girder 50 feet above a highway. and his beloved the next morning driving to work. His words are not meant to be so unique. Does she recognize his handwriting? Did he hint to her at her doorstep the night before of something special, darling, tomorrow? And did he call her at work, expecting her to faint with delight at his celebration of her, his passion, his risk? She will know I love her now. The world will know my love for her. A man risked his life to write the words. Love is like this at the bone, we hope. Love is like this, sweetheart, all sore and dumb and dangerous, ignited, blessed always, regardless, no exceptions, always in blazing matters like these, blessed.
Nice. Do you realize that that you read it as sweetheart?
Did
There.
I?
Yeah.
So that's
That's
what,
so easy to do. It's so easy to.
so that's so funny because that is the version. So I was telling you before we started, that I loaned my book out, I think, to a student. And so the version I have from the internet says sweetheart.
Hmm.
So I wonder, is
I
that
have.
that's their mistake?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, I mean, it's certainly Sweatheart in this volume. So,
Yeah,
but
interesting.
I
'Cause it's,
actually had the same thing. I had copied this from the I put in the show notes, I put the poems in the show notes,
yeah,
which I probably shouldn't do without getting permission. But I copied it from someplace online,
yeah,
and I just caught that. I said, "Oh, they spelled it sweetheart at the end," which I almost wish he would have done.
interesting.
You
That's
know,
very interesting because it's definitely sweatheart in the title, which it needs to be. Um,
right?
but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought, oh, because I thought I remembered it. Um, well, it's, yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wonder why it's reprinted incorrectly online. Um, I gosh, I don't know. I feel like I've sullied the experience.
No, no. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if he read it that way sometimes in readings. That second time, it almost has that. There's a like we said, he's sort of by the end of it, he's on this guy's side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally,
yeah,
totally. Um, yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point. That's a good point.
Well, Colleen Abel, thank you so much for doing this. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it, and I wish you well in all your teaching and your writing and your endeavors.
Thank
So
you so much.
you take care.
You too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.